My health bar hit 0. For a split second, my opponent and I just stood there, our swords stuck in each other. I was totally exhausted. And my eyes glazed over. I muttered, "Is this what you wanted?" But I didn't hear her answer. Instead, I felt a sudden jolt of warmth in my left hand. My body started to give out, and I let go of the strength that was holding me together. As everything went black, I felt myself breaking into 1,000 pieces. Just like Keba. We were both falling apart. I heard two familiar beeping sounds, one on top of the other. Everything was fading away fast. I thought I heard my friends Agile and Klein calling out to me, but it was getting harder and harder to hear them. Was I really slipping away? Imagine being somewhere totally weird and amazing. The sky is on fire with colors orange, red, and purple. It's like nothing you've ever seen before. I'm standing on a thick crystal floor. That's see-through, and beneath it I can see clouds streaked with crimson blowing by. When I look up, all I see is the endless evening sky. It's so cool. The only sounds are the gentle breeze whispering through the air, and the creaks of, well, I'm not even sure what. As I glance around, I notice that there's nothing but this small crystal circle under my feet. No buildings, no trees, no nothing, just me, the crystal, and those colorful clouds drifting lazily by. It's super surreal. But the weirdest part is, I have no idea how I got here or where here even is. The last thing I remember, a robotic voice kept saying, "The game has been cleared." What game, and what does it have to do with this strange place? I'm completely confused. One thing's for sure, I need to figure out where I am and how to get back home. Whoa, what just happened? I remembered my body breaking apart into a million pieces and disappearing into thin air. Was I still trapped in the virtual world of So? Or had I actually gone to the afterlife? I looked down at myself and did a double take. My leather coat and long gloves were still there, but they seemed different. Everything was slightly see-through, like I was made of colored glass. I waved my hand and my fingers sparkled with a reddish glow from the sunset light. It was pretty cool but also super weird. I tried to make sense of what was going on. When I moved my hand, the game window popped up with its familiar sound. Everything seemed normal. But I knew something was off. Was I still in the game, or was this some kind of afterlife? I had no idea, but I was about to find out. I was still trapped in this virtual world called SAO, but something weird was going on. A small box had popped up in front of me with a message that read, "Executing final phase. 54%. The percentage started to rise, and I watched as it jumped to 55. I didn't get it. I thought when you died in the game, your body would just disappear. But this was different. What was happening? I shook my head and closed the box, trying to figure out what was going on. Suddenly I heard a voice calling out to me, "Kurito." It was like music to my ears. A shiver ran down my spine as I turned around, hoping against hope that it was real. Please don't let this be some kind of trick, I thought. And then I saw her. She was standing in front of a sky that seemed to be on fire, with the wind blowing through her long hair. It was an amazing sight. My heart skipped a beat as I stared at her, wondering if this was really happening. Was she really here? I was frozen in place, my eyes locked on her smiling face. She was so close that I could have touched her cheek if I just reached out, but I couldn't move a muscle. I was afraid that if I looked away, even for a second, she would vanish into thin air. So I just stared at her, taking in the amazing sight. Her body sparkled like crystal in the light of the sunset behind her. It was breathtakingly beautiful, the most incredible thing I'd ever seen. I felt tears welling up in my eyes, but I tried to hold them back. Finally I managed a weak smile. My voice came out as a whisper, "Sorry, I guess I died." She looked at me with a mix of sadness and amusement. "Dummy," she said softly. A big tear rolled down her cheek, but she was still smiling. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking moment that I'll never forget. I flung my arms open wide and shouted out her name. "Asuna." She leaped into my hug, tears of joy shining in her eyes. I squeezed her tight, never wanting to let go. We shared a super long kiss, and when we finally pulled away, we gazed into each other's eyes. There was so much to talk about. The crazy final battle, all the things that had gone wrong. But somehow, words didn't seem necessary anymore. So I turned to check out the amazing sunset stretching out before us and asked, "Hey, where are we exactly?" Asuna looked down, then pointed into the distance. I followed her finger, and my eyes landed on something tiny in the sky. Way, way off from our little crystal platform. A small dot floated in the air. Imagine a giant cone with the top cut off. That's what a incred looked like. It was made up of tons of thin layers, stacked on top of each other. If I looked really closely, I could see tiny details like mountains, trees, lakes, and even tiny towns in the gaps between the layers. Asuna nodded when I whispered a incred. It had to be it. A huge castle floating in the middle of nowhere, surrounded by endless sky. This was the world where we spent 2 years fighting for our lives. Now it was spread out below us like a map. I'd seen pictures of Aincrad before, in ads for Sword Art Online. But this was different. This was the first time I'd seen it up close and personal. It was amazing. I gasped as I stared at the floating fortress made of steel. It was actually collapsing. A huge chunk of the bottom floor broke off and fell apart into a million little pieces. If I listened closely, I could hear the rumbling sounds of it crumbling, even over the howling wind. Asuna whispered "ah," as an even bigger piece of the fortress broke away. This time trees and water from the lake came crashing down with it, plummeting through the red clouds. It was a shocking sight. Our little log cabin used to be right there. The fortress was falling apart, floor by floor like tiny layers peeling off. 2 years of memories were disappearing before my eyes, and it made me feel sad. I slowly sat down on the edge of the crystal platform, still holding on to Asuna. But even with all these crazy emotions swirling inside me, my heart felt weirdly calm. I had no idea what was happening, or what would happen next, but I wasn't scared. I'd done everything I could, and now I was sitting with the girl I loved, watching as our world fell apart. Nothing seemed to matter anymore. I felt happy and content. Asuna felt the same way. She leaned into me, her eyes half closed as she gazed out at the destruction of Aincrad. I gently ran my hand through her hair. Just then, a voice spoke up from beside us. "What a great view." Asuna and I turned to see who was talking. To our surprise, a man had appeared out of nowhere, and was standing with us at the edge of the cliff. It was Akihiko Kariba, the creator of Sword Art Online. But this wasn't the heroic knight version of him we knew as Heathcliff. This was the real deal, a scientist in a white lab coat, wearing a crisp white shirt and tie underneath. His face was sharp and angular, but his eyes gleamed with a metallic intensity as he watched our world disappear. He seemed totally calm, like he was observing something fascinating, under a microscope. I was shocked to see him standing there, taking it all in with a look of quiet interest. Asuna and I exchanged a glance, wondering what he would say or do next. I couldn't believe my eyes. Kaiba was just like me. Kind of see-through. It was crazy to think that less than an hour ago, we were trying to kill each other, but now I felt super calm and peaceful. It was like I had to let go of all my anger and hatred to get to this amazing world with its never-ending sunset. I looked away from Kaiba and back at the castle, then asked him, "What's going on with Aincrad?" He spoke in a quiet voice. You could call it a kind of visual symbol. Right now the main computer that runs SAO is deleting all the data it stored. It's hidden 5 levels underground in the Argus building. I felt a shiver run down my spine as he continued. In just 10 minutes, this whole world will be gone forever. Asuna spoke up, her voice barely above a whisper. What about all the people who were trapped in the game? Kaiba's response was calm and reassuring. Don't worry about them. Just a few seconds ago, something crazy happened. A guy waved his hand and checked a window that popped up on, well, whatever he was using. And just like that, all 60174 players who were still alive in the game were logged out and woke up back in the real world. That means Klein, Agile and all our friends we made during those 2 crazy years are safe and sound. I squeezed my eyes shut tight, trying not to let my emotions get the best of me. But then I thought about something. Hey, what about the people who died in the game? I asked. We died too, but we're here now. Can't you just bring back the other 4,000 players who didn't make it? The guy didn't even flinch. He closed the window and stuck his hands in his coat pockets. His face was totally serious. Life isn't a game, he said. You can't just play with it like it doesn't matter. Imagine being in a world where the dead just vanish into thin air. That's what normally happens. Anyway. But you two are different. You get to stick around for a bit longer. The man who said this was someone with a pretty dark past. He had done something that hurt a lot of people, over 4,000 to be exact. You'd think I'd be furious with him. But weirdly I wasn't. Instead I just wanted to know one thing. Why did you do it? I asked. It's a question that everyone who knew about what happened was wondering. The man's face twisted into a sad smile, and then he just stopped talking. He sat there in silence for a while, like he was trying to remember something. Finally he spoke up. Why, you ask? Honestly, even I'm not really sure anymore. It's been so long since it all started. Have you ever had a dream that you just couldn't shake? For Kaba, it was a castle made of iron that floated high up in the air. He wanted to create a world where anything was possible, where the normal rules didn't apply. As he looked at me with his calm and peaceful eyes, the wind started to pick up. It rustled the lab coat he was wearing, and blew gently through Asuna's hair. The castle we were standing in was disappearing, bit by bit, vanishing into thin air. Even the amazing city of Algade was gone, swallowed up by the clouds. Kaba smiled as he thought back to his childhood. When I was a kid, he said, I had all sorts of wild and crazy dreams. But one thing that always stuck with me was that castle in the sky. No matter how old I got, I couldn't stop thinking about it. His eyes sparkled with excitement as he remembered his vision. Here's the rewritten text. As time passed, my dream only got bigger and more real. For as long as I can remember, I've wanted to leave my ordinary life behind and explore that amazing castle. You know, Kirito, a part of me still thinks it's out there somewhere. In another world, maybe. It's crazy, but sometimes I imagine that I was born in that castle too. I picture myself as a young boy who wants to become a brave swordsman one day. In my daydreams, I meet a girl with beautiful hazel eyes and we fall deeply in love. We'd get married, live in a cozy little house in the woods and be happy forever. I really hope it's true, I said quietly to myself. Asuna snuggled into my arms, and we fell silent again. I stared out into the distance and what I saw took my breath away. The weird decay that had been eating away at the castle was now spreading to everything else. Even the endless sea of clouds and the red sky were being slowly consumed by a bright white light. It was like the light was seeping in through cracks, getting closer and closer. Just then a voice spoke up behind us. One last thing, it said. Congratulations, Kirito and Asuna, you beat the game. We both turned to look up at him, and he was beaming with a happy smile. But his next words were surprising. And now I should be going. Before we could even react, a gust of wind blew by, and he vanished into thin air. It was as if he had never been there at all. The sun was setting over the virtual world, casting a reddish glow through the crystal floor we were standing on. But something felt off. My friend was gone. I wondered if he had logged out and returned to the real world. But that didn't seem right. It was more likely that he had deleted his character, and set out on a new adventure to find the true Aincrad. As I looked around, I realized that our virtual fortress was crumbling fast. We were finally seeing the top floors 76 and up, but they were disappearing before our eyes. A wall of light was sweeping in, destroying everything in its path. The sky and clouds were even breaking apart into tiny glittering pieces. In the distance I saw an amazing sight, a huge red palace with a delicate tower on top. Sitting at the very peak of Aincrad. It was an incredible view, but it was also kind of scary. The whole world was falling apart, and I wasn't sure what would happen next. Imagine what would have happened if the game had gone as planned. We probably would have faced off against the evil overlord Heathcliff himself. But even when the top floor came crashing down, the castle kept floating in midair, like it was refusing to give up. The deep red color of the castle really stood out against the reddish background. It was like the heart of the castle still beating strong even after everything else had fallen apart. But nothing can last forever. Soon a massive wave of destruction swept in and engulfed the castle too. It started to break apart from the bottom up, crumbling into thousands of tiny rubies that spilled down into the clouds. And just as a brilliant light was about to surround everything, the tallest point of the castle exploded into pieces. It was an epic ending to an amazing adventure. The world of Aincrad was gone, vanished into thin air. All that was left was a big empty space with fluffy white clouds, a tiny floating platform, and Asuna and me standing on it. We didn't have much time left. The creator of this virtual world, Kayaba, had given us a temporary reprieve. But soon, the nerve gear would kick in, and end everything for real. I gently placed my hand on Asuna's cheek, and leaned in to kiss her. This was our last moment together, and I wanted to make it count. I took my time, trying to remember every detail about her, every smile, every laugh. I wanted to lock it all away in my heart forever. As we pulled back from the kiss, I whispered, Well, this is goodbye. But Asuna shook her head and looked up at me with determination in her eyes. No, she said firmly. It's not goodbye. I'll always be with you, she whispered, her voice barely audible, but full of determination. She turned to face me, her eyes locking onto mine, and gave me a soft smile. Hey, what's your real name? She asked, curiosity sparkling in her eyes. I was taken aback for a moment. Then I realized she was talking about my life before. The one I'd left behind 2 years ago. It felt like a lifetime ago. A story from another world. My mind dug deep into my memories, and a name floated to the surface. It felt weird saying it out loud. But I did, Kurigaya. Kazuto Kurigaya. I said, the words feeling strange on my lips. I think I just had a major wake-up call. I'd lost track of time, but I'm pretty sure I just turned 16 last month. It was like my life had been on pause forever, and suddenly it started moving again. The real me, Kazuto, began to peek out from behind the tough guy. Kurito the swordsman, all the heavy stuff I'd built up in this virtual world, started to fall away. Asuna said my name slowly, like she was trying to get used to it. Kazuto. Kurigaya. Then she laughed, looking a bit confused. So you're younger than me, she said with a smile. I'm Asuna Yuki, and I'm 17. When she told me her name, it was like music to my ears. I repeated it to myself. Asuna Yuki. I felt like I'd never forget those words. And then out of nowhere I felt tears welling up in my eyes. All the emotions that had been locked away for so long came flooding back. It was like a dam had burst, and everything was moving again. My heart felt like it was shattering into a million pieces. I'd been trapped in this world for what felt like forever, but I hadn't cried until now. Tears streamed down my face, and I sobbed like a little kid. My fists were clenched so tight they hurt. I'm sorry, I whispered. I promised to save you, but I couldn't finish the sentence. The pain was too much. I felt like I'd failed the person I cared about most in the world. Regret washed over me, and I couldn't stop crying. Asuna was crying too, her tears sparkling like colorful diamonds that disappeared as fast as they fell. But even through her tears, she tried to comfort me. No, it's okay, she said softly. Asuna's words only made me feel worse. She'd been so full of life and promise. And now she was gone. I felt like I'd let her down, but as I looked at her, I saw the happiness in her eyes. Even through the sadness. I'm so glad I met you, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I'm glad we got to live together. Kazuto. Her words broke my heart all over again, but they also made me feel grateful for the time we had together. This moment was pure happiness. I felt grateful and loved. But then everything changed. The world as we knew it was ending. A huge metal fortress and the vast sky disappeared into a blinding light. Only my friend Asuna and I were left. The air around us started to fade away, breaking into tiny sparks. We hugged each other tight, waiting for the end to come. The light was so intense that it felt like our feelings were melting away. But one thing stayed strong, my love for Asuna. Everything around us was disappearing, but I kept shouting her name. All I could see was a sea of light. It was like nothing else existed except for us, and the love we shared in that moment. Imagine waking up to a world covered in a thick blanket of white. Everything was blurry and sparkly, like tiny diamonds floating in the air. Asuna's smile was still on my mind, but it started to fade away into the bright light. Then, I heard a voice. It was clear and ringing, like a bell. The words echoed in my head. I love you so much. In that moment, something amazing happened. The line between Asuna and me disappeared, and we became one. Our hearts and souls mixed together, and then, they vanished. But here's the weird thing, I didn't disappear completely. I was still aware of my surroundings. And what really surprised me was the smell of the air. It was like a big punch to my nose. I could smell the strong yucky scent of disinfectant, like the kind they use in hospitals. There was also a fresh sunny smell, like clean cotton clothes drying outside. And on top of all that, I caught a whiff of something sweet, like juicy fruit. It was overwhelming, but in a good way. I slowly opened my eyes but instantly regretted it. A super bright light felt like it was stabbing me in the brain. I quickly shut them again. After a bit, I tried opening them once more. This time, I saw a bunch of colors swirling around. But something wasn't right. It took me a moment to realize that there was some kind of goo blocking my view. I blinked a few times trying to get rid of it, but it just kept coming back. That's when it hit me, I was crying. But why? My chest hurt so much. It felt like someone had punched me right in the heart. It was a deep, sad pain that made me feel empty inside. I thought I heard someone calling out to me from far away, but I couldn't quite tell. I squinted through the light and tried to wipe away my tears. As I looked around, I realized I was lying on something soft and comfy. But what was it, and where was I? Anyway. As I slowly came to, I saw what looked like a ceiling above me. It was made up of off-white panels, some of which were glowing from something behind them. To the side, I noticed a shiny metal slit, probably a respirator, which is a machine that helps you breathe. It was making a weird groaning noise as it pumped out air. But something wasn't right. This didn't seem like Incred, the world I knew. I mean, who could have built this fancy machine? Even the best blacksmiths couldn't make something like this. And besides, we didn't have electricity in Incred to power it. As I thought about all this, my eyes finally flipped open. I was wide awake now. I tried to sit up fast, but my body felt heavy and wouldn't move. It was like it was stuck in place. I felt super weak. I tried to sit up, but my body wouldn't cooperate. I managed to lift my shoulder a little. But then I flopped back down. It was pretty sad. But I could move my right hand, which was a good start. I pulled it out from under the blanket and held it up in front of my face. At first I didn't recognize my own hand. It looked really skinny and fragile. I thought to myself, there's no way this hand could wield a sword. My skin looked pale and sickly, and it was covered in soft, fuzzy hairs. I could see purple veins underneath. And there were tiny wrinkles around my joints. It was weird to see my hand looking so different. I couldn't believe how real everything felt. It was like I was actually there. But at the same time it felt kinda weird and wrong. I looked down and saw that I had a tiny tube stuck into the joint of my elbow. A thin wire connected it to a small bag filled with orange liquid. The bag was hanging from a shiny metal stand, and the liquid was dripping slowly into the tube. I tried moving my left hand, which was stretched out beside me. It felt strange, like I wasn't really in control. I was lying on a special bed that felt like it was made of super soft, squishy gel. It was comfy but also really weird. As I moved my hand around, I was trying to figure out if I could feel anything. Everything seemed so real. But something just didn't feel right. I lay on something cool and wet. It felt kinda like my skin, but not quite. I was totally naked, which was pretty weird. Suddenly, a memory popped into my head from out of nowhere. I remembered watching a news report years ago about a special pad that helped people who were stuck in bed for a long time. It was supposed to prevent skin irritation and break down gross bodily stuff. I looked around the room trying to take it all in. It was super small with boring off-white walls and a ceiling that matched. But then I saw a big window on my right with white curtains hanging down. I couldn't see what was outside, but the yellowish light shining through the fabric looked like sunshine. I wondered what was going on and where I was. Everything felt really strange and unfamiliar.